Thanks again for staying with ANN7 Prime. And if you've just joined us, good evening to you. Dudu Myeni's term as SAA chairperson has come to an end. And out of the airline, Myeni has decided to bear it all. In an exclusive interview with ANN7, she pulls no punches in naming and shaming the real culprits behind SAA's woes.
Did Mr. Pravin Gordhan restrict you from speaking to the media?
Of course. Why do you think I am only speaking to you today when my tenure ends today, actually? At South African Airways, there is no Zuma. We have commissioned forensic investigations into all the looting that has happened at South African Airways. I haven't seen any Gupta or any President Zuma's name or company, and I can never be a proxy for anyone. And if I was a proxy for someone, I wouldn't have commissioned these investigations. These are forensic investigation reports. We discovered why South African Airways loses money, why it is in the position at which it is. Maybe not to delve into yours. When I started talking transformation, those people that were worried about losing what they are benefiting from South African Airways are the ones who started creating those stories. I can tell you today, South African Airways can be profitable. It does not need to be privatized. We don't need any equity from anyone. You just need the right people. I can give you the names of the companies. It is the job of anyone who wants to write and a journalists that are not lazy to do proper research to say who is Bidvest and who is part of Bidvest. Is there a minister somewhere? Is there anyone who is linked to Bidvest? It's not just about Bidvest only. Various other companies who are shareholders to the banks. That's why SAA can't look elsewhere for funding.
And emails were sent to Bidvest for their reaction, but we're still awaiting a response. And former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan responded saying, and I quote, "I do own shares with Bidvest, but that does not necessarily mean I do business with them. And why do you follow a story on allegations made by someone with no credibility?" End quote. And seemingly on a warpath, Myeni has named those she thinks are responsible for SAA's problems. And here are some of the names. She alleges that Pravin Gordhan tried to sabotage her and had an agenda to carry out at SAA. She names Bidvest and the influential people linked to it for looting SAA. Myeni says SAA's balance sheet depleted under former chair Saki Makozoma. She accuses former SAA CEO and aviation expert Coleman Andrews of sabotaging SAA. Without naming Myeni, accuses a former Mango chair, also the founding chair, of the selling of tickets of SAA and Mango. And joining us, Kim Heller, political analyst, and Sfiso Mahlango, group political editor. And we have Pagamile Hlubi, NUMSA spokesperson via Skype. Good evening to all our guests. Zamo Madlala, radical economic transformation spokesperson, joins us on the line. Sfiso and Kim, suppose a feather in your cap indeed, having to get this interview with Dudu Myeni. Very shocking that she reveals that essentially she was gagged, almost sabotaged by Pravin Gordhan. Tell us more.
I flew to Durban to have my afternoon with my Dudu Myeni Zuma to get this exclusive.
What is Zuma?
And it, she spoke candidly to say all of those who've been calling me Zuma as the rhetoric in Parliament, Mr. Julius Malema saying, I am Ms. Dudu Myeni. I'm married into the Myeni family. I am not a proxy for President Jacob Zuma or anybody else, and cleared her independence. It was very interesting when she got graphic to say it was Coleman Andrews who collapsed SAA because he came in as an expert, in inverted commas, but he was no expert. And she really took, me into her bravery to say, if you see the state-owned entity in this way, think about Bidvest. Who owns shares there? Who are the politicians who are implicated in this report, this investigation that I've launched into SAA. This is why I've been vilified. This is why I've been victimized. And, you know, my opening question for her was, why do you only do it now? Did Mr. Pravin Gordhan gag you? Did he try and keep you away from speaking to the media? And she was very forthcoming to say, why am I giving you this interview now? There was a list of things I could or could not do. I could not speak to the media. I could not even respond to the press without going through the then minister, Mr. Pravin Gordhan. And for that matter, she came out speaking at the end of the tenor, though, but she dropped a bombshell into what actually the problem is at SAA. And I think I had to say, Cindy, from the picture she has painted and the reports that I have seen and, you know, the perusing we've done throughout this day, many more people are implicated. People called her an underachiever. People called her a director, a juvenile. They've called her all sorts of names. But perhaps they were trying to run away from the implications, those things that they did at SAA themselves. They called her a proxy and a girlfriend of the president. But it was perhaps to cover up the corruption of billions that people, and even people in the ANC, have been benefiting from SAA for many years.
Pagamile Hlubinoma, spokesperson, thank you so much for joining us. Just your reaction to the exclusive interview we had with Dudu Myeni, now getting the issues off her chest with how the rot really manifested itself under Sakimba Kozoma. She names former CEO Coleman Andrews and Bidvest and various other companies as being the culprits for looting SAA. Do you think that an investigation, at least going forward, into these particular allegations is worth it?
Thank you so much for having me, Cindy, and allowing me the opportunity to respond on behalf of the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa. We are quite concerned by some of the allegations that have been made by the former chairperson of SAA, Dudu Myeni. We believe, of course, that if the allegations she makes about these politicians and even former executives are true, then of course we would welcome any kind of independent investigation which will get to the bottom of this. As you're well aware, NUMSA has been fighting very hard on the issue of South African Airways. We have launched several court bids to try and force the current SAA management, and here I'm talking about before the new CEO, to account to the public about the problems, about the looting and the allegations of corruption. Our experience as a trade union is that the senior executives at SAA are actually refusing to disclose, they are refusing to be transparent, they are refusing to take any accountability or any responsibility. And why we say this is because they have been, they've played an obstructionist role in trying to deal with the crisis that faces this airline in relation to tackling corruption. You will know, for example, that there have been several forensic investigations which have gotten to the bottom of the looting at SAA. The board is aware of these investigations. They've received the reports, but no action has been taken against any senior SAA official who has been named in the reports. And for us as a trade union, we find that to be completely unacceptable.
Let's stay on the line, please. Azamo Madala from Radical Economic Coalition. Good evening to you and thanks for joining us. Just looking at the facts that are coming out, of course, as Pagamile alluded to, there are various investigations that were sitting collecting dust, and Dudu Myeni vehemently defending her character and also her role in the board, that essentially she's being a target based on the corruption that she's uncovered there. Do you think this would clear her name, or should she supposedly engage more on other platforms to bring out the dirt?
Thanks for the opportunity, Cindy. Well, our opinion is that, unfortunately, the interview that Ms. Myeni did today is not going to clear her, because the vendetta has been going on for a number of years. It's been at least the last 2-3 years. But I believe what she did today was enough to give serious investigative journalists and those who are interested in the truth and looking at capture and what it is giving them enough to go looking. I mean, as Paramila was saying now, I mean, NUMSA has won a court case which clearly stipulated certain people should be suspended. They are still not suspended to this day. I mean, earlier on I noticed that you had Mr. Jarana on the show. Well, he's got his job cut out because there's quite a bit that he must go and sweep out from under the rug or wherever it's been put. And then finally, the shocking thing, the board was being introduced today, but the 2017 annual financial statements are nowhere to be seen. So I don't understand even how the Minister of Finance has worked out how they're going to bail out SAA when they don't have financial statements on how the company has performed up to March 2017. It's a joke.
Zamo, let's just get a perspective from Kim in that Dudu Myeni now essentially laying the blame at the door of Treasury, saying that they interfered, micromanaging the airline, dictating which companies to use, over and above that several other people, influential people, have been benefiting from Bidvest, to say let's look closer into the matters that are going on at SAA. Your reaction?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to commend Sifiso on a sterling interview with great depth. And it's this quality journalism that should actually be the signature script of our mainstream media, rather than the sensational, alarmist and slate that we see of headlines. As far as I can see, especially after this interview, we're seeing a story emerging around the fact that Myeni has been misrepresented, she's been vilified, she's been diminished not only by media, but by the former Minister of Finance, Pravin Gordhan, because her efforts to transform the organization as well as remedy problems that are in the organization currently seem to have been sabotaged and diminished. And that's very problematic. But I'm always curious about the story that we allow the mainstream media to tell, because it is as if the financial instability and crisis that we see in SAA now is a new entrant, as if it came with Myeni, but it didn't. A closer look at the financial statements of SAA showed that the balance sheet was in trouble in 1998, which was under the stewardship of Coleman Andrews. Yet, for some reason, we seem to cosset and protect and cocoon white managers and executives from any scandal around involving corruption.
Yeah, I mean, she also refers to a lot of people being protected and that there's benefits for friends, if you will, but there seems to be a cabal of companies that are just perpetually just benefiting from SAA. Zamo raises the point of this not being adequate enough to clear her name. In your why is it that we don't want to believe the probability that Dudu Myeni wouldn't be so audacious to make these allegations if indeed there wasn't any truth to it?
And I think, Cindy, running this interview, even for me, was an opportunity to understand what happened at SAA. I'd never met Ms. Myeni, but I wanted to hear her story and, equate it to the reports and the internal investigation and ask her on that and afford her the opportunity to respond. But I think three things came out for me that were pivotal to why there was a crisis at SAA. Number one, she cited that there were evergreen contracts for pilots, white pilots. Black pilots are still paid much less than white pilots, even in 2017. There is about 700 pilots at SAA. Less than 200 of those pilots are black. The rest are white, who earn double or more of what the black pilots earn. How do you have that situation in 2017? The cleaning tenders, the air chefs, the food that's eaten on the plane, security tenders are all under Bidvest. And she continually said to me, now go and do some research. Who owns Bidvest? Who from the ANC, who from Treasury benefits from Bidvest? And they get all the big tenders. Why did Coleman Andrews sell a fleet that was already paid off only for SAA to continue to rent a new fleet? And who do they rent it from? Who benefits from that? And I think when South Africans say to me, there's no white monopoly capital, this interview, even for me, for someone who knows about the existence of white monopoly capital, was a moment of realization that indeed white monopoly capital exists it is in the billions, and they would do anything to cover themselves, often at the expense of blaming one person who is the CEO or who is the chairperson because they are black. When you try and introduce an internal investigation, you are slandered in the press. And one thing I think she said that really got my attention was, I'm concerned about these leaks. It's almost as if when there was an investigation or when there was an internal dispute, it would be in the press the next day, as if someone within her desk, within her office, someone at Treasury leaked it to the press, vilifying her, while the real culprits escape eating billions and no one reads about them.
And Phakamile, I mean, as a union, civic organizations and South Africans in general, you don't see the outrage in the monopoly that is being enjoyed by a certain few influential people and their cronies. Instead, we use the distraction of Dudu Myeni. Anything that she says is questioned in terms of its authenticity or whether it's even legitimate. Why is it that we're not even investigating further and taking action against what's going on at SOEs and primarily SAA?
I think, first of all, it's really important for me to mention that as NUMSA, we believe, first of all, on the issue of Dudu Myeni, we believe that as the chairperson of the board, ultimately the buck does stop with her. So we are not, let me put it this way, we're not going to rush to exonerate her just yet. However, we must acknowledge the fact that in terms of the issues that we are dealing with right now at SAA, the reports that we have had privy to have access to, for example, which speak about the rampant looting and corruption that's taking place at SAA Technical, where you have a team of senior executives who have actually been identified in tender irregularities and fraud, just in theft, in theft of assets from the airline. Clear to us that it's not right to focus only on Dudu Myeni. What should have been happening from the beginning is that we should have been looking at not just the board itself and the fact that the board does have a duty in terms of its fiduciary duties to ensure that the airline is running properly. But more importantly, there is a team of operational executives who are responsible for the daily management of that airline. And there has been nothing done about dealing with the corruption that is in place within that team. It is a fact that anybody who has a copy of any one of the reports, I'll cite the Open Waters report, for example, where they've gone into great detail about specific managers who have played a role in chowing, in eating money from the airline. The vilification that they speak about, our members have experienced that kind of vilification. Anytime that they've spoken out about corruption at SAA, some of them have been dismissed, others have been intimidated. At SACA, there was a group of workers who were dismissed purely for discussing corruption in relation to South African Airways.
All right, Zamo, your view in singling out former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan and having an agenda as one of the allegations, and also that the placement of Coleman Andrews may have been strategic to run the airline to a halt, so to speak, so to justify privatization. Is this a fulfilling prophecy that we're seeing happening now with Finance Minister saying, they're looking for strategic partners for SAA?
Well, I don't quite understand how exactly the finance minister is going to find a strategic partner. The airline does not have financial statements as we speak for the past year. The last financial statements that there were in 2016, I'm sorry, you would have to pay me to take up shareholding at SAA because that's how bad the books look. So what is there that you are going to partner up in? Now, if government is going to go and load up a lot of money into SAA, meaning they're basically going to shore up the balance sheet and then go find a strategic partner, to me it's illogical. They've picked a man in Jarana, I believe, and they've even picked a restructuring officer, Peter Davis, whom I believe Jarana went overseas to go and interview. So the guy's been there for 2 weeks. Let the guys do their job and turn the airline around. Why are we rushing to sell off? It's a strategic asset. I don't understand why we're trying to sell it off.
Yeah, but I mean, as it stands now, you know, she mentioned that SAA's balance sheet depleted when Saki Makozoma was the CEO, chair, I think, of SAA of Transnet, if memory serves. And under that was Coleman Andrews, who sold off the fleet of SAA and continued to then profit from it by establishing a maintenance and services company in the US. There are a number of issues that are quite glaring, Susan. I'm wondering what would happen now, or what would Ms. Myeni want to see happen, considering the issue around her credibility, as former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan labelled her.
Well, you see, we don't define that as state capture. We just define it as looting. We say people stole and they looted the state, and they made billions and enriched themselves off our state, but we don't want to define it as state capture, because in this country we want to believe that one family and one man has committed state capture. But this picture is glaring, and I don't know why we can continue as South Africans to ignore it. State capture happened at SAA because billions were looted. People created companies simply to do business, major business with SAA. In the interview, she highlights that someone called Christo Visa, who is the founding chairperson of Mango Airlines, ended up selling SAA tickets. Now, how do you get the tender to sell SAA tickets when you're a competitor? It's just an extension of business to grow the scale and the magnanimity of white monopoly capital. But if you are one black person who has a voice and you attempt to speak out, white media will come against you like a swarm of bees to shut you up, because you know, a state capture must happen. South Africans must open their eyes to when state capture happened, and I believe white people really captured the state, so much so that we're talking about remnants today, when the big cats are sitting in Stellenbosch, in London, in the Western Cape, and they've benefited, and we are speaking on land and radical economic transformation. It's got to be radical because we have very little.
Yeah, but I mean, Dudu Myeni is almost the David in this particular story, the proverbial David, because she's sitting with accusations that she's leveled against the big guns, your Christo Vises, your Brian Joffe with Bidvest. And Pravin Gordhan's response for me is quite telling, in the sense that, no, she's not credible. Why would you want to even follow a story like that? And this is the response he gave to us in the questions that we posted. What do you make of that kind of cynicism or demeanor from Pravin?
Well, I think it's very insulting, and he seems to have a history of insulting his colleagues and comrades, which I think is quite unsavory. But this is almost a replay of the Brian Molefe-Eskom saga, where I think that Brian's crime was to confront the issues of state capture or business capture by white monopoly capital. And like Molefe, I think Myeni is trying to dislodge the root of apartheid-era tenders, and this is causing great discomfort. The issue of privatization is one that interests me because we're clutching on that as a solution. But I refer to a very interesting comment by the president of APC, Themba Godi, in his capacity as the chairperson of SCOPA. He went and he spent considerable time with the commercial and technical sections of SAA, the chain management division, management of staff, as well as the board. And he spoke about some tangibles which relate to the lack of performance of the SOE. And he spoke about a lack of resources in key divisions, which was undermining performance. And one has to ask whether that's deliberate, because it's slowing down the pace of new tenders coming into play. The other thing that he said, which is a tangible business solution, is a lack of agility around the aviation policy of SAA, which, and from a business point of view, this has seen SAA lose vital routes, particularly in Africa, to more efficient carriers. So these things need to be addressed as well to come up with an SOE that is viable and is at the forefront of economic transformation, which it should be. And of course he refers to, which Sifiso has already said, the greenfield, the evergreen contracts and the heaviness of that cost on the organization to date.
Oh, very quickly, as Fiso, where do we see the repeat of the exclusive interview?
Well, it's been aired on NN7. They can find it online, on NN7 online, and follow the story. I think South Africans must just make themselves aware of what the real state capture is and what has really happened, because it is a fight for wisdom and knowledge. And I think the first capture happened when they took books away from black people. It was to hide the corruption and the rampant assault on SOEs that people wanted to do.
All right, so we have homework for the weekend to go and connect the dots and look deeper.
Connect the dots indeed.
Congratulations again. Kim Hela, political analyst, joining us in studio, and Swiso Mahlango, group political editor for TNA and ANN7. Pagamile Hlubi, NUMSA spokesperson, and Zamo Madlala, radical economic transformation spokesperson. Thanks indeed for joining us. And of course, as mentioned, we'll air that full interview, follow the trend, or rather, or timelines on our social media pages. For now, we take a quick ad break. ANN7 decides with Mfundo Mapalane just after this.